Cameron Crowe and Ryan Kinney here to talk about Ryan's take on Coal Valley and Coal Valley Speaks. And are we back? I had an internet unstable message, but I think we're good. All right, yeah, we're good. So first things first, going to do a little introduction. So many of you probably have heard this introduction once or twice or maybe 20 times if you're a few of the organizers. But I wrote a blog post about 10 weeks ago probably now. And I wanted to talk about my high school experience because it's something I felt really strong about. And I gained a realization that if I feel strong about anything, I should put it out there so the world can see it because it might help somebody. So I did this. This was at the top of my list of things I felt strong about. And it was basically all about what I think is wrong with the high school, Coal Valley Christian School, where I went to school from kindergarten through senior year of high school. And the memories I have and how they shifted from really thinking everything was great about Coal Valley when I left to thinking, whoa, this environment is really bad after time. And it exploded. Tons of people that thought it was great, tons of people that thought it was terrible. I got all kinds of feedback, and I realized, especially for the people that said, I thought I was alone, thank you for saying that. Here's my story, that I couldn't be that person for everybody. So I made a support group on Facebook, and people started flooding into it and telling their personal stories. And we have 150 people in there now, and there's probably been 50 or 60 stories. And we realized this needed to be something bigger than my personal blog. And we created coalvalleyspeaks.com, where all the public content lives. You know, all these public interviews like this one are here. We've done over 20 of them now. And also the crown jewel of our collection, the joint statement. This is basically all the learnings and themes and recommended solutions from over 20 people that drafted this statement. We organized it and tied it up and put a bow on top and gave it to Coal Valley, and we've been trying to speak with them about it since then. And here's the page. It's a long document. We've got it nicely categorized by kind of headings and categories, and Ryan was a huge part of that, so I'm sure we're going to cover that in some detail in this interview. But this is what we want everybody to look at. That's why it's the prime featured spot on our website. So I will stop there. That's the context. So Ryan, I think normally when I start the questions, I ask what people thought when they first got exposed to this. And usually they first got exposed to it from the blog post, but you've been exposed to this specifically between you and me for a long time before that. So I think maybe we start with if you want to recap your background a little bit with Coal Valley, and then tell us about your kind of journey from after you left Coal Valley. And I think that will kind of naturally lead into some how Coal Valley Speaks kind of came out of that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So I started with Coal Valley in 8th grade. I went to Maranatha Christian School for 2 years before that. When I first moved to Meridian for the second time, and finally in 6th grade, went to Maranatha, which is a much smaller and I think probably now defunct school.
I think it's called City Hope now or something.
Oh,
There's
really?
A lot of people that have done interviews that went there. Yeah.
A fun fact: back in the '90s, Coal Valley and Maranatha were rivals because they were the two Christian high schools in town, and then Maranatha totally died away, and a bunch of people that I knew went to Coal Valley later. But anyway, went to Coal Valley in 8th grade. Graduated from Coal Valley. I would say you and I were friends, although we weren't in the same friend group. It was a small class, obviously, and so everyone kind of knew everyone, and we played sports together. But other than that,
I was telling your mom and your sister at the potluck that you and I go back to 5th or 6th grade.
Oh yeah, Little League baseball, right?
I didn't know that.
That's when we first met. Yeah. Kind of a small town, even though it's Boise. But yeah, we were buds for a long time, and then I both graduated high school. We graduated, as I'm sure you said, like true believers. Loved our Coal Valley experience. Had really good friends. Still do, obviously. Went to college at Boise State together. And I think I was starting to get an inkling that maybe things were not what I wanted them to be in like 2010, 2011, which was the first time I was starting to kind of really get kind of exposed to the truth about the LGBTQIA plus issues. And
so that would have been 2 or 3 years after graduation.
I met my now wife Nicole at school pretty soon when we got there, and we kind of got really close really fast, even as friends. And we were talking a lot about these kinds of issues. And she had a similar background in that she was raised very Christian and very conservative. And we, as we got older and older, I was starting to think more and more about it. And I kind of started to realize that I didn't really believe in God anymore. But it was kind of one of those things where the culture is so strong, and also there's all the other baggage of like, afraid of going to hell and afraid of this kind of different stuff. And that went for, a couple more years. And I think I got married in 2012, got married in the church, not in the church. I got married by a pastor. We were going to that church at the time. I would say that we were still Christians. But it was also during that year, like right after we got married, that I started like disagreeing with a lot of what I was hearing, and I was starting to get more and more annoyed. And I think that if I was still really emotionally connected to Christianity, I might have like attempted to talk to someone about it or confront my pastor or look into it deeply. But I was kind of more like, sorry, do we cuss on this thing? We don't cuss?
Yeah, we cuss.
Okay, great. Because my first thought, my general thought was kind of more like, hey, fuck this. Like, I never liked church. We can talk about that maybe later, but like, I never liked church. I never liked anything about the Christian faith really, except for that I believed in it. And I liked kind of debating it, like the finer points, but I never really liked church. And so I think I was like, I don't like this. I don't agree with this. But again, I was afraid because, as far as I knew, Nicole was still very much a Christian, and I think she was. And obviously, for people who don't know, if you're married in the evangelical community, like what your spouse, like falling away from the faith is like one of the worst things that can happen. And it's kind of like
unevenly yoked.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that it can kind of turn into like an automatic divorce. And it's one of those few things, like I think along with cheating or like child abuse is a thing where, the church is like kind of, they generally hold the divorce as a sin, but like that's kind of a little niche that's carved out. So I was afraid of that. I love Nicole, and I still do, obviously. But I was afraid of getting divorced, and so I kind of was in hiding a little bit. And so that went on for about a year, more than a year. But in 2013 was when you and I kind of had that now infamous to us game of pool at
Mulligan's.
Yeah, Mulligan's. Yeah, and I think you were actually the very first person that I ever like kind of was honest about that I didn't believe anymore. And I think at that point you were openly an atheist, right?
Very recently, but yeah.
Yeah, because you had just recently come home from overseas and everything, right?
I think I had lived in DC and then was in between DC and San Francisco, I think, or something like that.
Okay. But yeah, so I kind of talked to you about it, and you were kind of saying, well, first of all, it was a relief to kind of finally tell someone that. And I think putting it out in the world, like, just made me feel like, oh, okay, I'm not just driving myself crazy.
Yeah.
And you said something along the lines of like, well, don't you want to be honest and be truthful and live in your truth and everything? And at that point I was kind of like, well, I don't believe in anything after this. So maybe I'll just live a lie because I don't really care. Because if I don't have God, then like, I guess I'll just live my life as long as I'm happy. Sorry, Ginsburg's getting mad. But that didn't last very long. And within the next couple of years, Nicole and I started to talk about it more and more. And so now we're kind of in a spot where I'm openly atheist. I've definitely fallen off from all teaching, Cole Valley and the church, and that was kind of when I started to really focus in on like all the bullshit that we've been exposed to. And sorry, can we pause?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Or you just come back when you're ready.
Sorry, I'm a novice at this.
No, for the documentary shoots, like for the first like 3 or 4, I couldn't figure out what to do with Wookiee, so I could always hear him wherever I had like locked him up in the house, and it was like I couldn't focus.
But anyway, yeah, just to wrap up, and then I think when you came back for good here to Boise is when we started having conversations that were like, man, like what we'd gone through at Cole Valley with what we kind of believe and know now is pretty fucked up. And we kind of both felt like we had, emerged from a cult in a way, and that we had kind of, not necessarily like a cult, capital C cult or something, overtly violent or dangerous, but just something like a cult of, I don't know, just like kind of a
indoctrination,
a homogeny of thought. There was just this kind of pressure to be a certain way, think a certain way. So yeah. And so, yeah. So I think that the next thing is your blog post pretty much.
Well, no, I think the next thing is the stuff on Facebook for the 10-year reunion. You remember that stuff?
Oh, last fall. Yeah, because we were going to have our...
that kind of like crystallized some of my ideas.
Yeah, well, because
I'll tell that story, and I'll jump in if I want to add anything. But yeah.
Okay, yeah. So our class was like class of 08, and it was like this kind of a class of leaders, I'd say. Where a lot of people were like, very like, what's right? Let's do what's right. Let's not go with the flow. Let's be critical thinkers. And I have a lot of friends who are still in the faith and who are now gone, and it's the same thing. Like, just they've kind of come to different conclusions, and it's kind of cool to see how all these different religions have like, or all these different people rather, have like branched off into these different ways, and they've taken something fundamentally off about Cole Valley, and they've taken it and they've moved it in like different directions. So anyway, and then in that context, some of our classmates attempted to make a 10-year reunion. We didn't do a 5-year reunion, and our class president doesn't live here anymore. So we were trying to get it organized, something relatively informal, and we were on this like chat thing. And Taylor Worth is the one who kind of like started the confrontation to some extent, right? He was kind of like...
Well, yeah. So it was a Facebook group, and a few people had like kind of pulled it together, and they were like, it's looking unlikely that we'll be able to get together, but how about everybody just post kind of what they've been up to for the last 10 years?
That's right.
And
then, yeah.
And then I think I went, and then Taylor and Zach went, and you went. I don't know exactly what the order was, but I think I went first because a lot of people were like, I'm not going to do this. This is weird. How am I supposed to like explain everything that's happened in 10 years on a Facebook post?
Sure.
But I was like, well, I'm going to do it. I think it's cool. But I was like, but I'm going to be real about it.
You were very blunt, whereas I kind of sanded off the edges. I didn't like say still loving Jesus or anything, but I was kind of like, in Boise with my wife, we're happy, going great in law school, that kind of thing. But
I think I basically said like, I don't believe anymore. I think that a lot of Cole Valley was bad.
Yeah.
And
I remember that. And that got like a kind of a tepid response, but no one really, confronted you about that. And then it was Taylor who was kind of like, Cole Valley sucked. Like I felt like a stranger with you people for years. I won't put words in his mouth, but it was a very powerful, very blunt, all facts post. And he called people out, and people don't like to be called out generally. But I think, in my opinion, Christians, especially Christians in the Cole Valley bubble, really don't like getting called out, as I'm sure you can attest to. And so people kind of started, people that I hadn't talked to in 10 years started really kind of, lighting them up. And you and I both got really, really mad about that. And we were kind of just both we kind of got into a kind of a typical Facebook flame war about stuff. And I think that really kind of sunk Kinney. I think we were for like, we were going to try for like more of like a formal event thing. That was like, we're going to go to like a hotel or something. And then it was like, okay, well, whoever's in town, like no one traveled, but whoever's in town will go hang out at Bar Day. And that had, I think that really put a damper on everything. And that didn't even end up happening. And yeah. And so, you know, I'm kind of like poisoned by online. I'm poisoned by like Twitter and social media generally. I kind of, especially like since the election and stuff, I've been really like, I've had this thing where I've been waking up, you know, most days and just looking at Twitter and getting mad. And I've recently, I think in the last year, taken good controls to like kind of stop doing that because it's not healthy. But in a lot of ways, you know, social media kind of did radicalize me, and it, you know, caused me to really get mad about what, you know, some person who I have not talked to in 10 years. We weren't friends 10 years ago, you know, but I'll get real pissed about it. But I think a lot of it was a righteous anger that we had of just like,
I was like,
still think that.
Yeah, I was to my what I was feeling was like, not Taylor, not now. Like,
right. Yeah,
Taylor's gotten shit for 13 years straight, and he's finally like come to a place where he's not like self-loathing and like, you know, he can be his own person. And then when somebody wants to make the same old Christian BS like arguments at him, I'm like, fuck that, like not happening again.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like.
And he's just speaking his truth, and like the responses weren't even like you didn't experience that, or like, you know, yeah, you experienced that, but that's correct because that's what the Bible teaches. Like that would obviously be a lot more offensive, but it'd at least be more honest. And something that we've noticed throughout this, you know, situation is that it's never like engaging with the merits of it. It's always like, oh, come on, man. Like it wasn't that bad. Come on, chill out. Da, 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 da. And that's the kind of shit that I can't stand, because I'm just like, you people are like sleepwalking through your lives. Like I can sense by your reaction that like what he's saying is bothering you, but you're just like kind of choosing not to engage. And I can't stand that. I can't stand that stuff, especially when people are suffering. It's like, if you want to walk through your life and be just this passive person and not have a worldview that's connected to values that mean something to you, hey, that's supposed to be the point of religion in the first place. And I'm not religious. And why do I have more moral clarity and moral certainty than you do?
Right.
That's one thing. But like when someone is just talking about what they went through and your first response is, come on, you're being dramatic, or you're attacking us now.
You're attacking us. Yeah.
That's when I really just can't stand that shit.
Mm-hmm. So then some time went on, and we had, you know, had a lot of more conversations about Coal Valley and, you know, how it bothers us more and more and more. And now we'd kind of been mobilized a little bit from this, from this class of 2008 skirmish. And then I messaged you and Taylor in a group thread, and I was like, I'm going to blog about this. And then, so what did you think when that happened?
I just said, it feels like a million years ago now, but you were kind of in this thing, you were in the zone, you were just kind of had all these different blogs and ventures and ideas, and you were running a lot of them by me. And at the time, I just kind of thought about it as a piece with that, because I was like, that sounds great. Like, you know, I like a lot of your ideas, but I didn't really think that it was going to explode to the extent that it did. I guess maybe I was just kind of too, for me, I think now it's like I've come through the other side of it, and I'm kind of just like, well, of course that was all wrong. Of course that was all terrible. And I think some combination of like, I don't talk to most of those people anymore, and it's over in Meridian, that I just kind of like didn't really consider that there would be a lot of people, both currently with the school and people that we went to school with, who would be like really, really upset about what you said. Or I think that upsetness like expanding out to people who were the opposite of upset, who were just felt so vindicated and heard. And yeah, so I didn't think any of that was going to happen. And I was just kind of like, you know, great. Like you did a survey, and I was happy to do that. And I was interested in your results and stuff. And yeah, but then once it exploded, I really was, I was really enjoying it. It was like I was truly glued to my phone like every night. You know, I wasn't even like, I usually will watch Netflix or something or YouTube or whatever, and I wasn't. I was watching this
Yeah.
stuff.
No, and you and I and Taylor were just like had a side conversation going, and it was like an all encompassing thing. Like, because I felt like I needed to kind of like shepherd this post through the gates of social media so that it didn't get like utterly dismissed by somebody and then nobody paid attention. So I had to like respond to everything, defend it, back it up to like, it needs to like see the light of day and can't just get squashed on, right after birth. But then, yeah, so like big skirmishes were happening. And one of our Bible teachers was like really engaging early
I
on.
think that was part of it as well for you, is that not only were you the target, but like a lot of your close personal friends from back then were like very upset with you and were talking to you, and that makes the stakes more heightened, definitely.
Yeah. So how do we get from that, blowing up, we're messaging a lot, to this idea for the joint statement?
Well, I think, you did the blog post, all this was happening. How I remember it is that kind of what you were saying in your introduction, that you were getting a lot of responses, you were getting a lot of, emails, texts, that kind of thing. So you made the support group, and I kind of think that maybe besides the joint statement, the support group, just the decision to do that was the best thing to come out of this so far. It just,
it went to another level for sure.
Absolutely. And I have like been kind of off Facebook for a while. I mean, in terms of like, I don't really go on it. I'll like go on it to check notifications or whatever, but I don't really like scroll it like I did in high school or college. And so I didn't really know that they kind of had this thing was kind of popping off, these support group, just private groups that you could go to. And yeah, I mean, it was like a real community there for like several weeks. And it was just like, every post was getting like 20, 30, 40 likes, hearts, like comments on comments. Like people were bringing up teachers or classmates, and then someone would come in the comments and say, oh yeah, I remember that person, like, they were cool, or like they were an asshole to me too, or that kind of thing. And it was just really exploding. And I think we started, and you and I were messaging this whole time kind of on the side, and we were starting to realize that we were seeing a lot of trends. Like just similar teachers being mentioned a lot, similar administrators being mentioned a lot, and similar kinds of things. And you could very easily connect the dots between the things that were happening and like the worldviews that probably inform those decisions and stuff. And I think it was at that point where we were kind of like, we should like have a statement. We should have something because this is all private, obviously. And there's a very good reason for that, as people were talking about these extremely sensitive issues. And but we were like, let's put something out where it's like, we are going to document this, we're going to put it out, and we're going to say they're going to have to read this. I mean, they're going to have to at least know that it exists. And I think we were like, we're going to consolidate all the stories, we're going to come up with common themes, and we're going to come up with, and then I think as it was moving on, we started moving more into like, hey, let's come up with some policy recommendations, and let's kind of like see if we can make it a little bit more of a win-win than just kind of like these are our stories. And that's when I think it was kind of first starting to take the shape that it is now. Whereas I think at first, I mean, and this was all happening so fast, like this was happening in a matter of like days or weeks, and pretty soon we were like, it's great that we have all these different stories and people have this safe place to come and talk about this stuff and share with each other and stuff. But what if we could change it? What if we could, do something? What if we could do some kind of policy or do some kind of activism that could cause it to, improve in some way? And I think that was really attractive to us. You and I are both kind of like interested in policy and kind of, politics and that kind of thing. And so we were like, maybe we can do it, I think. And then we just started really just sifting through pages and pages and pages of this stuff. And then other people in our group were starting to bring in like, sociological studies and policy from other school organizations. It was starting to get pretty overwhelming. It was, it was a lot of information, and, we all work, and you have like, 5 or 6 different gigs, and I have law school. And so it was starting to get pretty stressful. It's definitely dominated a lot of my time this semester, but it's been worth it. I thought the statement turned out great. It's like that we have, it's a real deliverable, as they say. A piece of content.
How would you explain to people how like over 20 people could make a document like that? Like, what was the process?
Well, you structured it pretty intuitively, I would say. It was just kind of like, I was kind of the executive editor, which is just basically like I was, emailing and texting people to kind of making sure that we were all getting our stuff done. And we had three or four different section editors, and our sections were just basically sexual issues, which included everything from sexual assault to treatment of queer folk. And then over here was administration, which was kind of like a catch-all the more I thought about it, which it was kind of like all these issues are not great, but they are also like kind of, a lot of them are very common to any kind of school, public or private, Christian or non-Christian, but that you need this is the whole point of having a school with like an administration, run by adults. That you're supposed to have this accountability, you're supposed to have this kind of thing. And so that was the administration piece. And then there was also culture, which is the third one, which was even more analogous, I think, because it was like, or ambiguous, I should say. It was like everything from teaching evolution in school to racial issues and everything in between. So those are the 3 big issues. And, and then but beneath the section editors were the kind of the contributors, which are the people who had their story. We made sure that any story we used was either authorized to take from the post in the group, or they came into these shared Google Docs and put all their stuff in. And it was very, very difficult. I mean, to answer your question in, 2 words, not easy. It was just kind of like getting all this information, cutting out the, unnecessarily like, salacious material, kind of avoid using names, kind of avoid, because our thing was, while you and I think kind of are a lot more like, I don't care about anyone's feelings. It was kind of more like, in terms of like Coal Valley, it was like, we want to do good. And we know that if we just send this like, 50-page screed that's talking about, Christians suck and all this, then it would be dismissed, and probably rightfully so. So we kind of wanted it to be as reasonable as possible, while still not diluting the truth and what people had experienced. And that not just that this is one person's story, but this is enough anecdotes in a line tend to suggest a trend. And so.
Yeah. And then, so we posted that. And then there were the section editors. So there ended up being, I think, 4 of us that really took leadership roles in that document.
Mm.
And then that was the beginning of the official organizer side convo.
Mm.
So how did that grow? Because it grew from 4 to now we currently have 8.
Yeah. So let's see. I think it started as you, me. Was Taylor ever part of it, or was he just with our own separate group, right?
Taylor was, it was like you, me, and Taylor from like the early days. And then Taylor was kind of too busy to really do the joint statement. But then it was, you and me and 2 others. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. There's 2 others. And then I think it was like, we could start to identify people in the group who were the most passionate, the most vocal, or had like the most interesting stories. I think you did a really good job of, when you sensed that people were, clashing with you or disagreeing with you, that you would like invite them to come on, because you wanted to like kind of a very diverse group of people to all talk about stuff. Yeah. Like, I mean, I don't think that, she'd mind me saying like, Chelsea was like, she'd have criticisms of you, my sister, and, you were like, hey, come on. And then we could talk about it, and you can have kind of more of like input on what we're actually doing. And Um, yeah, so then it grew and grew, and then obviously Mark came to you about the documentary, and I think he was added soon after that. And that was a really huge thing. I can't really remember when exactly that was happening. Was that after?
Now that I think about it, that was before the joint statement.
Okay.
Because I think I had only done 2 interviews. Like I had written the blog post and then I'd done 2 interviews and like more were coming, and like it was clear like this was just getting started. And Mark approached me and said, "This is incredible. This needs to be a documentary. And here's like all my credentials." And I was like, "Really? Okay, cool." So then he was like, "Yeah." So actually, would have been 5 of us then, because it was all the joint statement people and Mark.
Mm-hmm. And so now we've added 3, 4.
Yeah. So we added 3 more, kind of as we were going, like, and as we were kind of seeing new pockets of perspective in the support group, realizing that we were kind of underrepresenting some views in this, because early on it was just it was a bunch of straight people that hadn't been like had this as much trauma as a lot of the other people in the support group. And so that caused us to kind of do some things or articulate a few things that felt like tone deaf to a lot of them. For instance, when I wrote up, our first meeting with Brad Carr and Matt Beglinger, my summary recap of that meeting, and when I posted that in the support group, a bunch of people were like, "You basically just pardoned them for everything that they did to me." And that's when I realized, and when nobody in our like organizer group had really seen that coming, I was like, "Wow, we need to have at least one LGBT person in there, and then we need at least one person that's like been like a sexual assault victim in there, for perspective, because like we need to be more."
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was like I was someone who was like, "Yeah, that sounds great." Like what I heard from you when you talked about the meeting, and that sounded good, and I was caught off guard by it as well. But I think as soon as I started to kind of read different posts about it, I was like, it was a really good point. Yeah, I really get it. And besides like, whatever happened to them, or like, what their identity is, there were just we had all kind of, besides I think one person that had a very positive experience at Coal Valley, and we were only in hindsight looking back. And so I think that besides being all straight, all white and that kind of thing, it was just like, it was very speculative for us. We were like kind of fighting this, like,
we didn't have direct experience with it. It was like, we know these things are bad, but we're trying to like channel these other people.
Right. And I think that like you can be as empathetic and you can be as philanthropic as you can, and you can still just kind of have huge blind spots. And I think also it's just inherently less powerful when it's like a bunch of relatively privileged people talking about the theoretical lives or rights to exist of these folks, where it's like, you guys could at any moment just drop what you're doing and just start living your normal lives. Whereas like, this is my reality. I can't just not be gay. I can't just not be trans. I can't just not, and that was, I think, why we did that. I think that was a good thing we did.
Yeah. So we've been trying to talk to Coal Valley, right, about this joint statement, and trying to find, like you said, like how do we try to make it better? Like how do we actually try to prevent some of these bad things from continuing to happen? What has it been like trying to bring Coal Valley to the table?
Not great. I mean, we've tried. It's just, the thing is that I was thinking about this the other day. I'd be very interested to kind of see how this would play out if this had happened, like even like 5 years ago. Because 5 years ago, or even earlier, we still had a lot more pull and juice over there, where it's like, a lot of people still know who you are, but now I would say more people know about you at Coal Valley because of this than anything that your time with there, and even more so with me. I mean, most people over there don't even know who I am. You know, I didn't keep any ties with them, even when I liked Coal Valley. I was very quickly like, you know, I was popular enough, but I wasn't like this guy who like you had these like close personal relationships with these teachers and administrators. And I kind of just went on and lived my life. But yeah, it's, I think that's been a huge struggle for us. And I think we've heard as much, just like they don't know us, you know, they just know that we went there years ago. And that's the other thing. So two of the big things actually come from that, from the distance, the passage of time. The first one is that they don't always say it's so different now. Oh, it's so different now. And, it's kind of a powerful rhetorical device because it's like, we can't really prove that it's not. I mean, we can in terms of like, we have newer people in our group who talk about stuff, but like, we just have a lot less firsthand experience. Where if we did it after we graduated or soon thereafter, we could have kind of been like, bullshit. Like I remember you, I remember you, I remember you, I remember you.
But on the other hand, we didn't have the confidence or self-assuredness to probably do it in a powerful way earlier. So it's like,
or if we were like preternaturally, you know, organized for little pissant 20-year-olds, we probably would have been a lot more like what we talked about earlier, like much more screedy, much more like fight the power, much more like, yeah. And the reality is that like, you know, with a movement like this, you know, they still have a lot of power because they don't really have. It'd be one thing if it was a government or a school or something where there's this like forced accountability. It's a private school, like they can do whatever they want pretty much as long as it's not, you know, criminal in some way. And so that's why we've been really forced to kind of come to the table with them. And there's obviously been debate in our group about, you know, where to go. Should we hold their feet to the fire and like trust that they are going to come to us? You know, do we have that ability? Do we have the ability to like hurt them to the extent, you know, not hurt's the wrong word, but like
leverage,
kind of pressure them, make them aware of our, you know, existence to the point that they have to come to the table? Or do we do the thing that I think we're more doing now, which is like, hey, let's talk. Like, these are true stories, but we understand that it's more complicated than that. Let's come together, that kind of thing. And I think there's pros and cons for both sides. You know, I'm someone who's probably more in the camp of like, you know, let's just publish it. Let's make it as public as possible, because I think no matter how well this thing goes, and I still have optimism that we can do good things, the number one way we could help kids is by convincing their parents not to let them come in the first place. And for a myriad of reasons, you know, it's a bad school. You get a bad education, especially with science stuff. You know, I didn't learn anything about science. I still know nothing about science. And, you know, I'm a good student and my parents cared and all that. And it's expensive, and you just don't get any tool unless you're going to become a teacher at Coal Valley, or you're going to be in the church, or you're going to be in some field from like your family. Like, you're missing out on so much on top of all of, you know, God forbid, you know, you go there when you're some demographic that's ousted or, you know, ostracized. And so that's kind of the argument for being outwardly hostile. But, you know, I think, because we've talked about this before, is that, you know, we think of the Coal Valley parent as like someone who is like, I love this. I love everything that's happening here. This is so great. I love being a very conservative, very fundamentalist Christian. This is all great. But the reality is that a lot of students are not like that, because a lot of parents are just like, oh, this is a Christian school. I'm a Christian. Like, this is going to be a good place for my kid to go, and he's going to stay away from drugs, and he's going to stay away from this and that. And we have the money. They're going to get a good education. They're going to be better in college. Those are a lot of things that just are assumed about that school, because I guess I don't really know why. I think they're good at marketing themselves, that are just not true.
And shushing up any dissent.
Yeah, totally. So I think that has pet power. I think that this movement has had power and like put people on notice. And I only hope that there's been an invisible impact that we never see. I hope that's the case. But there are kids that are still there. And if we had just been like, burn the house down metaphorically, we would have been dismissed. And those kids maybe, if we could get some kind of increased reporting, increased accountability, increased awareness training, like there's just so many different things we could do that could do it, that could, be a positive impact.
Right.
That's why we should keep on the path we're going on.
Right. What do you think about the documentary? Like, what do you think about the impact? So you talked about kind of two ways to kind of approach Coal Valley and like work with them. There's one where it's like, basically don't work with them and just go like as much for exposure and awareness and, scare people off from Coal Valley. And then there's the other one, which is, be very, very measured, like compromise, meet them in the middle, like, go for, small incremental progress, not burn bridges.
Mm-hmm.
How does the documentary fit into all this?
I would say the former. I would. At least in terms of how it's being perceived. I think it's a powerful thing. I mean, I think that we have definitely run into this thing of like, they don't like publicity. They don't like public. They like private. They like closed doors. They like one-on-ones. They like, they like these and we've seen that in the stories. We've seen that in the statement. I mean, so many people complain about stuff and then it's, let's pray about it. They complain about real problems and they're like, well, talk to a teacher about it. It's like, well, you're an administrator. Like, you have more power than a teacher, and it's very much like, let's go away and, or just let's you go away from me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to keep pretending like the sun is shining. And the documentary is like the antithesis of that. And I think that's just human nature. It's something that I can't personally fundamentally understand, like something in politics. It's like you have someone say something on like it's written and the power of that is like X. If you get someone on video saying that, the power is like 10X. Even if you like trust the source or you trust whatever, like the video is so much more powerful. And I think that for them, to a certain extent, the documentary like makes it more real because you have people who are willing to go in front of professional, videology or, videography equipment and just say, yeah, this stuff happened. And it adds credence to like what you're saying. It's one thing if you post on Facebook, such and such did this terrible thing. It's a whole other thing of like, I'm going to dress up in nice clothes. I'm going to go in front of this camera and I'm going to tell something that's theoretically going to be like, turn into a feature film. Like, yes, this happened to me.
Something that like, not that it will, but like could be on a streaming service like Netflix. Who knows? Like,
yeah, or like YouTube or Vimeo or that kind of thing. It's something that's accessible by everyone. Like, even if it's something like that, or it goes into, a film festival. I mean, like, I just think that, and I get that to a certain extent, that is more powerful. But I think that you have been very careful to say, like, we want you guys involved. And I think you're honest in that. But I also think that, like, I also see what they're saying in terms of, like, they probably don't want to be a part of anything like that, even if it's, like, this measured, come together, let's all do better thing, even though I don't agree with that statement. Like, even if we did that, even if we did, like, hey, this is a triumphant story of, like, alumni coming together with the current administration and like fixing problems in the school and like assign them virtually no blame, they would still hate that because the implication is still, they
needed us to come like bring it up.
Yeah, exactly. Like we started this and we're these like, a lot of us are not Christians anymore. And I think I would say most of us are not Christian enough for Coal Valley. And, I just think that they really hate that. And, but that said, I think it's a good thing. And I think that it's almost like as it hurts the impact of one way of approaching them, it necessarily helps the other way, which is like, if they really hate it and the documentary in some way, sinks or limits the ability for us to work with them, it's that much more powerful, and I think we've made a good point to, like, say we're willing to work with you. We're willing to work with you. We're willing to work with you. Let's meet. Let's talk. Let's meet. Let's talk. And it's slow going so far. I mean, that's kind of a thing where a problem that we've run into is that you and I like to move fast. And, Coal Valley is an organization and they're a bureaucracy. And even though they're not government, they still very much have a lot of competing interests, and they're also a business, and they don't want to fuck the money up, and they don't want to. I think right now internally they're thinking about how much light should we give this. If we completely stone them, then maybe it'll go away, or maybe it'll out, or it's for us to go, like, I don't know what these people are talking about. But I think that they're also kind of concerned about this could get really bad, like maybe if we could just talk to them, we could present as reasonable.
Yeah, we've heard some people are like, will we lose our jobs because of this movement?
Well, I'm like, what have you done? I don't really know. I don't think that we've gone after anyone's job. I don't think we've gone after anyone. We've been very careful to not put any people's name, put anyone's name on anything that could, harm them or anything like that. I personally believe that they are operating in bad faith. I don't think that they want any help. I think that at the end of the day, they probably think they're doing just fine, and that anything that they're messing up about, it's just, the Lord will sort them, or the Lord will figure it out, or this and that, which is kind of this fallback that a lot of these kinds of Christians do, where it's like, let's just not fix anything that we don't care about. That's the key. Like, they'll fix things that they care about.
Mm-hmm.
But if they don't care about it, then they go, well, it'll all work itself out. God works in mysterious ways. So
what do you think that there is a bigger picture? We talked about there's like two kinds of ends of the spectrum of our approach to Coal Valley, like the, hold their hands, come together, sit at the same table, look each other in the eye, like find common ground, be totally friendly and like, amicable. And then there's the, like full on protest, like get the news involved, like get as maximum exposure, maximum opposition. Is there a bigger picture than Coal Valley with this documentary?
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about it. Like, I think that's maybe the newest kind of thing we've been talking about, is how this is, I don't think we ever thought that this was just a Coal Valley thing, but we didn't really necessarily have the confirmation that this is something that's, I think that Coal Valley didn't start fundamentalist Christian education, perfected it perhaps. No. Okay. But yeah, it's everywhere. It's all over Idaho. We've seen that. The post about Lighthouse Christian, it's all over the country. I think that there's a very aggrieved political and religious constituency in this country. And I think that they feel very threatened by the modernization of the world and of the country. And I think that they feel very threatened by, and we saw this. I mean, that's what's kind of funny about it, is that, I kind of feel like this kind of happens more and more. This has been happening more and more recently, obviously. And I think that something like the Obama administration, or gay marriage being legalized, or these different things. But I remember this back when we were kids. I mean, I remember them saying Christianity is under attack. I remember thinking, like, basically no one in the world is Christians. America is the most Christian, and we're rapidly falling away from Christianity. And then you come out the other side of it and you look back and you're like, there's Christians all over this country and all over the world. And they're the most powerful group politically, I think, top to bottom in the country, and then kind of by default the world. But that doesn't move people. What moves people is victimization, terror, fear. And I think that as the country becomes more and more modern, we're going to see more and more of these kinds of schools popping up and saying, hey, those of you who can afford it, or those of you who are, willing to, accept help from us with strings attached. Like, come circle the wagons. Like, the world's going to shit. By the way, the world's going to be ending soon because it's the end of time, that kind of thing. It is kind of like, I think a lot of people at the end of the day don't actually believe this stuff, but I think that there's very much a cultural feeling that's like a death cult. Like, this world isn't going to last much longer. Like, it's going to be the end times. We're going to have, a reckoning, and, let's lead a revival in this country. And by that, we must, put our kids and raise them up the way they should go, which actually means, like, let's indoctrinate them and then make them get married really fast, and then make them have kids really fast, and then become so leveraged that they have to start. Anyway, I'm getting off topic, but I think Christian is a tool, general idea. And I think that it is a political act, and it's a political movement. And, at the end of the day, a lot of political movements, they start to break down when you have disparate voices. And how much more effective if you have a strong united front? And how much easier can you have a strong united front if you just make everyone think the same way and make everyone feel deeply, deeply ashamed if they're different in any way? And so I think that is the power of Christian education. And I think that is what, that's what, I don't know. I'd actually be interested to see statistics about, is this kind of thing growing or is it shrinking? I'm actually interested about, like, how the economy affects it. It seems like, from my standpoint, looking back on it and thinking and seeing these people who are still so deeply convinced that all this stuff is true, they have not modernized in any way, talking to parents or listening to these comments about people being like, nope, it's all right still. Like, there is no such thing as like a rightful abortion. There's no such thing as a righteous, gay person. They're an abomination before God. Like, just the hard edge stuff that we were told every day, or, all the time. And when you're a kid, you're just like, yeah, unless you are personally affected by that. And we see it. If you are personally affected by that, it breaks your brain. But if you're not, then you're just like, yeah, I guess that's the truth, and it's very powerful.
So how would you compare the goals, the positive impact, rather, of changing Coal Valley and this bigger, adding to this bigger discussion of Christian education?
Sorry, what's the question?
Well, I guess it's a little leading question, but so there's, we set out to kind of change Coal Valley, right? And we've been talking about, like, what are the right tactics to do that? But now that we're kind of thinking bigger, I mean, should we be, does the positive impact of, like, adding to this big national, international discussion, is that so much greater than the positive impact potential of changing Coal Valley that, like, we should go full steam in that direction? Or, like, is there a balance to be had, or, like, is there really, like, it's peanuts compared to that, so, like, that's what we need to focus on?
It's interesting. I think it's a series of trade-offs. It's that you have a lot of pull there with Coal Valley, and it's what we know, and we know the people. And even though I think there's a lot of similarities across the nation, I think that every situation is different. There are people who are reasonable but get sucked into the system. There are people who are true, like, I would say, borderline fascistic believers in this kind of thing. And there's everyone in between, And so I think that the movement has the opportunity to run or to connect with other movements. I'm sure we're not the only people who have had this kind of thing happen. The other thing is that it kind of, like, in some ways confirms the log line about you at Coal Valley, that you have, like, kind of bigger fish to fry. You have, like, not this thing specifically, but just like that, they're like, oh, you're running for public office, which is hilarious. Like, the idea that someone would be able to run for major public office in this state off of abolishing Christian education. Going back to, like, the delusion of that, it's like, you're in Meridian, Idaho. Like, you couldn't be safer. Like, calm down. Like, but anyway, I think that's something we're gonna have to keep struggling with. I think that it's a matter of practicality, like what could we do. It's also a matter of, you know, in our quest to, like, you know, move this larger, more nationally, do we leave Coal Valley behind? And does that give Coal Valley permission to be like, see, this guy's just this one of these typical, you know, left coast liberals who are, you know, he got indoctrinated in the Bay Area and now he's coming here to tell us what. And before we could even respond, you know, we're on our way to bigger and better things, you know. And I think that a big part of Coal Valley and Christian education's generally brand is like, they are very quiet. They're kind of unassuming. You don't see them trying to make headlines. It's a lot of like, we're here doing our Christian thing. And, you know, it's very powerful and it's very pervasive in American culture, but I think it's also like draw attention, you know. You see every, like, you know, I think unfortunately they're largely, you know, Republican candidates who they have things thrown in their face about, you know, gay conversion therapy or these different things that Christians believe. And once it gets exposed to like the broader culture, it's shocking to people who have no idea. I mean, I talk to people now who were even raised in conservative environments and they can't believe what we're taught, you know, the idea that, you know, murder of abortion doctors is great, you know, like that's a fringe idea that almost no one in this country believes in and is a political loser. But it's just this kind of in this grotesque soup that we are exposed to. And I think that they, in a certain way, know that. And I think that's why they try to keep it as close to the vest as possible. So I think that as they're attacked, they're going, or attacked, they're going to circle the wagons further and further. So all that is to say, I don't really know. You know, I think we're going to know a lot more, you know, when we get this documentary finished, which obviously it's going to be a while. But if we could make something that could pierce this little bubble that we have and get out to something that's bigger, you know, something beyond like a couple folks in different circles have seen your posts and stuff, and that's been great. But like, if we could get a movie that could speak to something much larger and then that have traction, I think that'd be a different conversation. But I kind of think that you don't want to try to do too much too fast. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that it's we definitely can't leave Coal Valley behind. This whole thing is about Coal Valley. So even if we want, I do think that the impact of a documentary is going to be way more positive than anything we can accomplish with Coal Valley. But the documentary is about working with Coal Valley. And I want Coal Valley to change. You know, it's not like I'm just looking for an example. I'm just looking for, you know, an axe to grind so that I can make a documentary. Like, no. In fact, I had no plans for any of this to happen. Remember, we're like totally shocked that any of this went down. So now like doors are opening and we're just like walking through them because we can for the first time ever. And so I think I'm kind of like, I mean, we've been trying to meet with them for 2 months, and it's, yeah, we're young men that want to move fast, but like, not all, I mean, you and I are, but like our group is young people, and we want to move fast. We want to like get this ship pointed in the right direction. But 2 months for no movement is too slow, for anybody. So that's been really frustrating. And though I haven't given up all hope, there's been times when like I've thought, yeah, it's just not going to happen. We're going to have to go rogue because we won't have any other option. And we'll always leave the door open if they want to come talk to us, but we can't keep wasting our time with overture after overture after overture and just getting slapped down. So I feel like we're pretty close to like, we're kind of on our last legs in terms of like, can we actually work together? Do they actually give a shit about these problems?
Yeah.
Because so far it doesn't seem like it. I think there's still chances, but yeah, we're not going to wait much longer. And so I think it's like we'll be as collaborative as we possibly can. But if they don't want to, we're not going to just wait around forever. We're going to move on with the things we can do.
Maybe they'll make their own video. It's just being like, Coal Valley Speaks thinks that we're doing a bad job. Where for me, I think we're doing a good job.
Well, they have actually started doing more videos. Did you notice that, right?
Yeah.
So, I don't know, it's kind of funny.
Everyone's pivoting to video.
Well, this has been a great video.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, is there anything else you wanted to cover? I think that's pretty much all questions I had.
Yeah, I got most of my soapbox talking in, so that's kind of what I liked. Yeah, I think that it's been very positive. I'm interested to see what happens. Do we have any like kind of general plans for when the summer happens? Because I feel like right now everything we're working on is like we got to get a school year up, and with the semester, like, you know, a little bit unbelievable, literally, like.
Yeah. So, you know, some of our group is gonna. I in particular am gonna do a bunch of travel and stuff, but like, I think that. What?
Humble brag.
Humble brag. But Mark is gonna. I think it's gonna be a lot of like heads down video documentary work, like over part of the summer, and then yeah, well, you know, hopefully we can keep. Hopefully communication has happened by then, and we can kind of keep things going. You know, maybe at a slower pace, and you know, with vacations and everything, but still keep things moving forward, and then hit the ground running in the fall. But yeah, we're not going to let up the gas. I mean, well, I guess we let up the gas a little bit for the summer, but like we're going to come right back to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
All right. Well, thanks again for doing an interview, and I'll see you soon.
Yeah, man.
Later.
Bye.
Bye.